In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to use HikariCP in our Spring Boot project. So with that, let's go ahead and jump on in. So if you're not familiar with what HikariCP is, it's basically a very fast, zero overhead production quality connection pool. And so when we use our Spring Boot applications today, and we use something like Tomcat, there is a Tomcat connection pool. And we use that by default without even knowing it. So there are other options out there like Hikari, which promise us much better performance and less errors, and it's a production quality connection pool. So we're going to take a look at how to use this in our Spring Boot application. So I will leave you the link below on this. There's also a GitHub page with a bunch of really great information in here, along with all of the different properties that you can kind of configure for the HikariCP, and just like how to use it. So I'll leave both of these links here. There's also some information in the current Spring Boot documentation that talks about what this is and what a connection pool is and how to configure it, and that the default is Tomcat. So I'll leave this information with you as well. But this is actually pretty easy. Like I said, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to grab the actual dependency that we're going to need. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new project from scratch. So we're going to create a new project using IntelliJ IDEA here. And we're just going to create it using the Spring Initializer. And I'm going to go com.therealdanvega. And we're going to leave all of these defaults. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to select Web. And from the SQL side, I'm just going to select JPA and H2. We're going to click Next. I'm going to call this project HikariCP. And we'll go ahead and finish. So this is going to create our project for us. So the first thing that we're going to need to do before we can actually use this HikariCP is we're going to need to include that dependency. So we're going to come into our POM. We're going to go down here in our dependencies block, and we're going to go ahead and put that in there. I'm going to save this off, and Maven projects need to be told about this now. So we can import that change, but I'm just going to enable auto import just in case I go ahead and add other stuff to this later. So now if we go down in here, we should see this. So there it is. Here's our package, and here's our Hikari data source class. So now with this in place, we used, before I think it was 1.4, we used to have to actually go in and configure a new data source class on our own, which would take in things like the data source URL, the username, the password, etc. If we were using a different type of a connection pool. In Spring Boot now, we don't need to do that. It's actually really easy to use this. So all we need to do is go into Source, Main, Resources, and open up application.properties. And we're going to go spring.datasource.type. And so again, by default, because we're using Tomcat, it's going to use the Tomcat connection pool. And so right now what we can say is we actually have a different data source type that we'd like to use, and that's the Hikari data source. So if we go ahead and save that, let's go ahead and run this, and then we'll take a look at actually how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and run my demo application just so we could see some information in the console that kind of confirms that what we've done is actually working. So let's go ahead and move this up. And if you're seeing this and you see like this endpoints tab here and a little bit of a different look and feel here, that's because I'm using IntelliJ 2017.2. Some cool new things are happening in there, and I can't wait to show them to you. We're actually getting an error, so it looks like something is already running on 8080. No worries. Let's go ahead and check this out. Just gonna delete these. Alright, let's go ahead and run this again. I think I was working on a demo before and I didn't properly shut it down, so that's probably what happened there. No big deal. A little live debugging while we're going along never hurts. Why did that do that? Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I must have had an extra keystroke in there, but let's go ahead and run this one more time and it should work. Sorry about that. All we're doing there is defining the data source type. Again, because Hikari is now in the class path, because we added it to our POM, this will now work. If we didn't do that first step in adding that dependency, this would throw an error right away. Like it wouldn't haven't even been an option there. So we should be good now. Looks like we started. So let's come back up here, and so we're definitely using Tomcat. Service started on Tomcat. Now if we go down here, we see as this connection pool actually gets started. So here's the data source. So you can see the data source is the Hikari data source, start completed. And then as we're going down, schema, JPA is working, and started. So that's really all I wanted to see from that standpoint. It looks like everything that we wanted to do is working. So I just want to show you a little bit about how this actually works, just so we know that it's not magic. So we talked about once we added that dependency, we import this jar here. We have these different classes like the Hikari data source. So if we look for something called the data source configuration class, so data source configuration, there it is. And if we look down towards around, it goes, no, 80-ish. There we go. So around here, we see we have this act conditional on class. So what this is saying is this is basically a configuration. It's a conditional, and it's saying I only want you to create this class if this condition matches. And this condition is saying I want to look for the Hikari data source.class file. And since we declared that as a dependency, we now have that class file on the class path. So that checks off one. So once this is satisfied, now it'll move on to this. And it'll say conditional on property. So now that we have a property, we have the spring.datasource.type, which we've declared in our application.properties, and it is equal to this. So because those match, it now wires up a data source configuration for us of the Hikari and creates a new Hikari data source. So now what we do, now that we have this Hikari data source, there are configurations that go into the Hikari data source. And if we were to come back to what we talked about earlier, this documentation, we know that we can configure things like connection timeout. So the default is 30,000, which is 30 seconds. But if we wanted to, we could create our own, or we could set all of these own properties. And we can see this prefix here is spring.datasource.hikari. So basically, that is the prefix. If you wanted to look in the config, you can get a list of all of those properties, or just look in the documentation. So now I can come in here and say spring.datasource.hikari, and now we have a list of all of those properties that we can set. And so one of those was the connection timeout, and remember it was 30,000 before, so now we'll set it to 60,000, so that's a 60-second timeout. So I think we're just going to leave it at that. I hope this was helpful. We basically included the dependency for HikariCP. We changed a property in application.properties to set the data source.type. And we saw it run, and we just kind of took a look under the hood and saw that the magic of configuration, it was able to kind of set all of this up for us. We didn't need to go in and create our own data source class. So that's it. I hope this was helpful. If you liked it, please give me that thumbs up. Leave me some feedback down there and let me know what problems you guys are facing, and I'll try and get some videos together for you on that. So with that, thanks for watching and have a great day.